Welcome to Beyond Talking Points from Little Visionaries Bookstore. I'm Bridgitte Jackson-Buckley, and today I'm speaking with Pam Gregory. Pam is an astrologer and the author of You Don't Really Believe in Astrology, Do You? Welcome, Pam.
Thank you. Wonderful to be with you.
Wonderful. Okay, I must say, after reading your book, and to use your words, I am in awe of the profundity and scale of astrology. It simply is amazing how much information we can learn about ourselves and the universe through astrology. So you describe it as a deep, rich, mathematical, precise, symbolic language that has to be mastered. So what led you to learn more about astrology?
Yeah, it all began after I left university. The following week, I emigrated to Toronto, Canada, which is something I'd wanted to do since I was about 10 years old. And I had $100 in my pocket and knew no one and started new life there. And within the first sort of couple of weeks, I joined a yoga class. And there was a wonderful big guy there from Jamaica. And some of the girls said he's an astrologer. So at the end, I went up to him and said, look, I know nothing about this, but I'd love you to do my chart. So I went to see him the following weekend and I spent 7 hours with him. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It just blew my world apart. And it was so immense. It was like, my world had split open in terms of there was this whole dimension of meaning that I hadn't even been aware of that was so enriching. So from that point on, really, I haven't stopped learning, and I'm still learning every day. I mean, it goes on and on. I certainly won't have long enough in this lifetime to learn everything. It's very humbling in that way, actually. You never get to the point of saying, yep, cracked it, understand, know it all, done it. It's even though it's a language, usually with French or Spanish or whatever, you get to a point of competence where you say, yeah, I'm fluent and have perfect language. But I don't think you ever get to that point with astrology. It has so many layers of meaning.
That's really interesting because when you talk about it on your YouTube videos, you talk about it with such elegance and awe, and there's a lot of love and respect that comes forward. And you just explain it so clearly and make it so that it's practical and accessible to people listening to you. So just saying that there's more to for you to learn is like, wow, it must be multi-layered.
Yeah, it really is. And I think what helps me, Bridgitte, is I spent 20 years teaching senior management people in all different industries. It could be aeronautics, auditing, accounting, marketing, whatever, medicine, all different industries. The biggest problem they had when they were making a presentation was too much complexity. They just dived into the details. So one of my major tasks in helping them make persuasive business presentations was clarity and accessibility for people, no matter what their level of knowledge, from low to high. So I learnt that skill in business, and I've really applied that to astrology, because if people don't grasp the meaning, then it's pointless me saying anything. I'm
Right.
just wasting his time and mine. So the clarity is something I really try and work out when I've got a massive information, very detailed. How do I make this really clear?
Well, I think that's what we're all trying to do, just moving through life, you
Yeah.
know? Okay, so let's talk about. I am truly amazed with the birth chart, Pam. I mean, I really, really am. I had no idea, that it was it. Well, I'll let you describe it, but that it's a map with the potentialities and possibilities for our life laid out at the moment of birth. It just so how does our birth moment define our lifelong relationship with the universe and serve to reconnect us with the universe?
Yes, this is very interesting because I followed a particular ascended master for some years, and recently he's channeled and by someone I know. And recently he said something very interesting, that the point of incarnation was incredibly specific. It was within 2 minutes of either side of the time and within 5 kilometers of the location. So if you're going to be born on the side of a motorway, you will be born on the side of a motorway, because that is the chart that your soul has chosen to incarnate in this lifetime. And with time, there's sort of two very important axes in the chart, like crosswise in a compass. There's a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. And the sort of left-hand end of the horizontal axis is known as the ascendant, or the point of incarnation. That's when the ancient peoples believed that the spirit entered the body. And those axes move very quickly with time, roughly 1 degree for every 4 minutes on the clock in terms of linear time. So that's why you are anchored. It's almost like lightning rods anchoring your soul into this lifetime, but just this lifetime. This is your blueprint. This is your map for this lifetime. And I believe you've had many lifetimes before. We'll go on to have many lifetimes afterwards, because, you know, it's a soul weaving a tapestry, if you like, through these different lifetimes. So, but this is our map for this lifetime. But I don't, as I hopefully say in the book, I don't see that as fated. I see that as potential. And so
Yes.
that's what's exciting about astrology. Once you sort of turn that on its head and say, I'm not a victim of this, I'm a creator with this particular blueprint.
So, I mean, to just wrap our heads around just how unique and genuine each of us are. So, anywhere on the planet. So if my birthday is December 1st and I'm born at 2:30 and someone on the other side of the world is born at the same time, we still have different charts, correct?
Well, if it's the same, it depends what you mean about the same time. You know, if they're kind of
Oh,
10,
that's
12
right.
months apart, sort of thing, but you know, it would give the same chart. Then you will have the same blueprint to work with. But what, you know, what I hope I emphasize in the book, and what I've said really through all my work, is it's how we play the music, the frequency, the level of consciousness with which we play the music. You know, we can have a pretty tiny life, we can have a magnificent life, depending on our level of consciousness, because that's what we're here to learn, really, to elevate that. That's why we're here.
Well, you write about the birth chart serving as a choice enhancer, and that there are urges that need to be played out, and that we're not born neutral or a blank sheet of paper, and that everything that happens in our life is already in our birth chart. So then, can you talk a little bit about free will and sovereignty? If everything is already laid out, where does that come into play?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I mean, to me, we enter this life with certain gifts and abilities that we've learned in previous lifetimes. And my second book, actually, How to Co-Create Using the Secret Language of the Universe, particularly talks about the moon's nodal axis, because the south node, and it's too complex to explain astronomically quickly, but the south node of that, it very much describes our gifts that we've learned in previous lifetimes, that we bring in with us, like weaving an infinity symbol into this lifetime. So we bring with us at the point of entry, not just nothing, we bring in a lot, but we also bring in challenges. You know, and they will be laid out by hard aspects, multiples of 45 degrees normally. And so I can very clearly see in the birth chart any issues with the mother or the father, or big dramatic events that happened in childhood, because they are all, it's like you know, the acorn already has the information to grow into the oak tree. I can see the information in the blueprint, and therefore I can go back in that person's life, which is what I do in every consultation, and say to that person, you know, what happened at the age of 3.5? There's something dramatic here that was very traumatic, that felt overwhelming for you. It was linked to your mother. You know, what happened? Because that set up a script in the neural network of intensity, and I need to live with intensity and a passion. But it was meant to happen, even though it may have been traumatic, because I can see it. It was meant to unfold as the acorn growing into the oak tree.
Okay, so that is my question. Like, when you clearly you can see things in the chart. I've had my daughter's chart read minimally, and what she saw is actually what manifested in my daughter's life. So I'm just not clear. What is it that you see? You're looking at what is it are you looking at that you can see something that can happen in someone's life?
Okay, because I'm not seeing, I don't believe I'm particularly psychic. I don't hear
Right.
voices, don't see visions, wish I did, be really helpful. I don't. I'm literally a translator of the
Translating.
symbolism and the geometry. That's what I'm looking at
Okay.
the, so something like a traumatic event when you're young, maybe it's usually Pluto's involved, transiting or solar arc Pluto, because Pluto is the planet of trauma and survival issues and death and all that kind of tough, heavy stuff. And if it's aspecting particularly your sun, your moon, your ascendant, then it's going to hit you quite hard personally. So when you're a child, the events tend to be, if anything, slightly more sort of external coming in, because you have very little free will as a child. But as you become an adult and you have greater free will as you move through life, and you start to hopefully understand astrology and the choices that you have in the chart, the latitude that you have with this rich map that you've been given, then it's down to your frequency much more. So I think the level of sovereignty correlates entirely with age, because as a child,
Okay.
you have very little free will. You're just a kind of,
Right.
aren't you? When you start, but as we become competent, then we start to live strategically, and I think astrology is magnificent as a tool to do that.
Well, yeah, and I really like the story that you, I can't remember it exact, but there was a little baby whose parents had, well, a younger child whose parents had his chart read, and it just made me think that the importance of the birth chart, like everyone should have their chart read, and that every child, because it can help you to see how to best guide them, what to put them into. I mean, it's just a wealth of information.
It is. And, often, obviously, parents will have 2, 3, 4 children, and they could be very, one could be very mathematical, another very artistic, another very
Yeah.
sporty. So understanding that from a tiny age in the birth chart, as you say, Bridgitte, you know what to nurture, you know what to cultivate. Should you enter them into a music school, a performance school, a Steiner school, what is the best fertilizer, if you like, for that child's growth?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think while of course it is really important to develop your own internal knowing, your intuition, and just feeling into situation, it can be very helpful to seek out someone who's really highly qualified, high consciousness to provide some esoteric information, be it psychic, astrological, because I have found it very, very helpful. There are pathways I just would not have gone down, things I would not have looked at without the assistance of this type of information.
And
Okay.
as I
Oh,
say,
go
just to echo, Bridgitte, what you were saying earlier, it expands your choices.
ahead.
Once you understand the symbolism, the purpose of each transit in your life, the purpose of it, not just what's going to happen, but why it's going to happen, that expands your choices, because you understand what the soul's path of growth is during that period of life. And it's the why that I think astrology offers us that's so valuable, not just the what, but the why. Because
And you know what else I think of, Pam? Sorry, I keep thinking that about pre-birth planning and how the soul has a plan to come in for this incarnation, and the birth chart is the map.
yeah,
You can your soul wants to get to this destination or have this experience, but it is up to you of how you have the experience or what you do, how you experience the movements of the planets.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so it's practically helpful. It's a spiritual framework. I have never been dictated to by my chart, but boy, has my life been enriched by it. I mean, a millionfold in so many ways. I bless the day I went to that yoga class and met that wonderful chap. I couldn't be more grateful.
Wow, I can relate to that. I can relate to that. Okay, so let's talk about archetypes because the word archetype is primarily associated with psychology, and people may have heard the word archetype used. For example, the author Joseph Campbell, his
Yep.
book "The Hero with a Thousand Faces," and it's a metaphor for the journey of the soul through life. and how it's all oriented around consciousness and trying to bring about transformative experiences. So, in your book, you write that archetypes are extremely important in astrology. Why?
Well, that's that is a big chunk of my language, okay, because it's a combination of the archetypes and the geometry that gives me my language. Those are the two big pillars that give me my language, and the geometry can be easy and enabling, or it can be challenging. If it's challenging, it's like the grit in the oyster, where adjustments have to be made in life to produce something beautiful, a pearl or whatever. So the archetypes are incredibly rich. And this really began, Bridgitte, way, way back. I mean, 6,000 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia, which sadly is now modern day Iraq. But people used to sit in the evenings and watch the planets appear in the sky, because with the naked eye, you can see as far out as Saturn. And they used to tell each other stories about the gods that lived on the planets, because they didn't have television or computers or anything. That was their sort of entertainment. And from those stories, or those myths, what are now known as myths, the archetypes of astrology were born. For instance, if we look at the archetype of Mars, it is, the male principle, it is energy, anger, aggression, drive, goal setting, achievement. So you can be, negative or positive on that spectrum, but it is modified, for instance, in which sign it falls in. Is it Mars in Aries, which is the warrior energy, or is it in Pisces, which is much more soft and fluffy? So it's modified, each planet is modified by the sign, but it's also modified by the house, because each birth chart is cut into 12 slices, like slices of a pie, and each house has a different meaning. So Mars in the 10th house would be energy, achievement in your career. In the 4th house, you might be wizard at DIY, because that's the home. So
Okay.
everything, so it becomes like a kind of 27 dimension matrix, because you're not just looking at Mars, you're looking at all of the archetypes. So the moon, for instance, the moon is it's your essential needs, what you need to feel satisfied and happy in your life. And so therefore, if you have the moon in Pisces, you might need to connect with the divine every day. You might write poetry, listen to sacred music, meditate a lot, that kind of thing. If you've got Mars in Taurus, you're probably a brilliant cook and gardener, something very sensual and tactile, and very gifted at those. If you've got moon in Gemini, you'll probably be a writer, a speaker, a journalist, because it's communication. It's quite high vibe communication. So every archetype is modified by the sign and the house it's in. But going back to the moon, that's a particularly rich archetype, because it will tell me about your early childhood. It will tell me about your mother, your experience of your mother. It will tell me about your instinctive reactions to life, what you need on a daily basis to feel happy. It's very important in relationships that your moons are compatible, you and your partner, because you may love each other crazily, but if you haven't got compatible moons, because the moon is to do with the daily living rhythm, it's very hard to live together. So there is just such richness in every archetype. So, Mars described the moon, and they are, I think, more commonly known. And now we're getting into planetary archetypes that are way out in deep space beyond Neptune and Pluto, and we're having to research and discover what those archetypes are all about, because I think they represent the evolution of our consciousness, this next stage of ascension that we're going through, and that's super exciting.
So it's multi-layered. There's a wealth of information. There's the planets, the moons, and all of that information that comes. How can we best use this? Like, if it would be beneficial for a child to have their chart done, should you have your chart done periodically, or is once enough to check in daily? Like, it's a lot of information. The planets are constantly moving. So how can we best use this?
Yeah, if you're not an astrologer yourself, I mean, having your chart professionally read is, I think, invaluable as a starter, because that's about you, and it is, I think, unparalleled in its ability to give self-understanding. I think it crystallizes who you are. And often, if you're lucky, the astrologer will articulate parts of yourself that you couldn't articulate as well as that. You know, it's a deep, deep part of you, but the fact he, she puts it into words suddenly validates a part of you that maybe has never been validated by anybody in your life. So it can be a very affirming experience to have your chart read. And then normally every year or 2 years, you can have that updated with what's happening with the transits over that coming period, year, 2 years. And in understanding that, it's like having a cosmic weather forecast, because, you know, if you know it's going to rain today, you take an umbrella with you and you wear a raincoat. You know, you don't go out dressed for summer. Certainly not in the UK. But if you know it's going to be a glorious day, you'll dress and plan differently. So it's really, that's quite a good analogy. It's just like that. If you know the prevailing cosmic winds, how do you operate in life to the optimum? So it's not that it's fated, you are using the information strategically. So say, you know, you've got Jupiter coming up to your career area, you know that's going to expand your career, you're going to be appreciated, you could be promoted, you could get a salary increase, so you're going to work towards that, to maximize that. If it's Saturn coming up to that career area, boy, have you got to work hard. You've got to keep your head down. You can't buck the system. You've got to obey the rules. You can't be rude to the boss. You know, you've really got to grind. But at the end of that hard work period, you will get your reward, which won't be lucky or easy. It's hard earned reward. So it's got a different quality to Jupiter. Jupiter feels luckier. If you've got Uranus coming up to your midheaven, you need to get more creativity, individual self-expression in your work, add things to your toolkit in your work, or you're gonna get very, very uppity and restless. It's restless energy. I want more freedom. I don't be told what to do. No, I'm not gonna stay till 6 o'clock in the evening or do overtime. Meh, I wanna be free. I'm a maverick. And if you behave like that, under a Uranus transit, you may get fired, which gives you the freedom you unconsciously want.
Oh, yeah.
So it plays out one way or another, but understanding the quality of those archetypes enables you to kind of cooperate with them, if you like, and play them to their optimum. So that's where astrology, I think, is invaluable, really. I mean, particularly it's a very hard work thing with Saturn moving up to your midheaven, you know, gosh, I'm just working, you know, 14, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. But actually, then it comes good. Then you turn lead into gold when it gets to that high point of career. So understanding the process reduces your resistance.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Reduces your resistance and enables optimum expression of those archetypes, because that's what they want to do. They want to optimally express to maximize your soul's growth at that time.
Well, what? Wow, wow. Okay, so let me read this this part that you wrote in the.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, it did. It did. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so this, I like this a lot. The movement of the planets in their orbits do not physically cause any change in us. There is nothing mechanical happening, no push or pull, even though sometimes the energy does feel push or pull. It is simply that we are causally related to and interrelated with the planets. So their movements are totally correlated with our feelings, emotions, and experiences on Earth. So how can you determine if you're using astrology as a crutch or a tool? You know, for example, you may read in newspapers that when there's economic uncertainty or something going on like a pandemic, that people are reading the sun sign columns frantically. You know, it has astrology has been reduced. So how can you determine if you're using it as a crutch or a tool?
I think that's a very good question. I think if you're just using it as a crutch, that suggests you're still in victim mode.
Ooh, nice, Pam.
Thank you, whoever just gave me that. So I think you're still operating in victim mode because you're letting the astrology dictate to you, whereas the best use of astrology is if you understand, even in basic terms, the archetypes, you integrate it and think, okay, I understand the energy of this period, so therefore, how can I use it best as a creator? So crutch equals victim to me. And what the astrology is simply doing is pure potential of all these different rich archetypes. It's pure potential. And the way it operates, apart from the moon, which clearly has a strong gravitational pull on the tides and our psyches, and it's close enough to do that physically, but the other archetypes, I think ultimately it'll be discovered. You know, I'm going back to Pythagoras's harmony of the spheres with this, that wonderful ancient Greek Pythagoras, quite brilliant, that each planet actually has a note, has a resonance, has a frequency. And the combination of those frequencies in that particular pattern at any time affects us. Now, whether that is merely a kind of quantum link, so it's not physical, or whether, I mean, recently, tiny pieces of, I think they're called magnetite, have been discovered in our brains. This is what happens with homing pigeons, apparently migrating birds, tiny pieces of magnetite. And if that is the case, then there may well be some physical effect, be it distant, that is a frequency effect. So it's like we're hearing the frequency of the planets in their particular pattern. But what each archetype in aspect to other archetypes gives us is a series of urges. It doesn't dictate the consequence of what we will do with that urge. You know, if it's a Uranus transit, we will just want to kick off because we'll want to be free. We won't want to, as I said before, play by the rules, have anybody tell us what to do. That is the urge. Now, what do we do with that? Do we become a delinquent in society? Or are we put in charge of, I think I said this in the book, you know, a team of men heading across the Atlantic in a storm, where you would be a hero with that kind of energy. So it's understanding the archetype, and in doing that, preventing any resistance in your life to that archetype, or preventing any lower expression of the archetype. With Saturn, we could get really stuck and stale.
Yeah.
And instead finding the highest expression to live the best version of ourselves, to live our best lives.
Well, that statement you just made, finding the highest expression to live our best lives, that is exactly where we are right now. We are in a profound moment of change and transformation. The energies are fast and they are intense. So how would you say that we can best use astrology to navigate this particular moment? Because there's a lot of individual change and we are seeing the external collective change, which is of course mirroring our internal change. So how can we use astrology within this particular moment? There's so much uncertainty.
There is, and in my work, I always come back to frequency because it is so easy in these extreme times, which are so chaotic and uncertain, to just be buffeted. You know, I mean, I haven't watched mainstream news now for almost 18 months. It has been joyful. I think my frequency has gone up several hundred points just not doing that, because there's an onslaught of drama and negativity and distress from external sources very often. So the big message, I think, for everybody, whatever your birth chart, is to go within. Go within, find your center, find your anchor, find in your chart what that is for you. Is it being in nature? Is it meditation? Is it music? You know, what is it that you can just drop into stillness, hopefully several times a day, just be in bliss and hold that center, and that is your absolute anchor. And your focus is internal. You know, what's my frequency? All through my days, you know, I walk my talk. all through my days, you know, what's my frequency? And if somebody sends me something and think, oh, you know, wish I hadn't seen that, that's not so good, I will bring myself back, you know, slow my breath, close my eyes, just drop, like almost like butter melting in the sun, back into bliss to raise my frequency, or have bare feet on the grass.
Oh, yes.
You know, that's wonderful to kind of decompress the bzzz. There's a lot of zzz energy right now because, you know, the intensity of the energy is just extraordinary. We can see that in the strength and amplitude of the Schumann resonance, the heartbeat of the earth, because Gaia is upgrading at the same time. So we are sandwiched between these high frequency energies coming from the photon belt and Gaia upgrading. You know, we haven't got a chance. We've got to upgrade. And the whole collective is upgrading. So I think whatever your chart, that would be my answer to that. But your chart will help you know what the best way to bliss is. Is it nature? Is it music? Is it, you know, that will show you the best route to bliss for you. And look at your moon for that, or look at where your Neptune falls. That represents bliss too.
That is wonderfully stated, Pam. I could not agree with you more. I mean, frequency is all. It's pivotal. It's pivotal, and you really have to have your spiritual toolkit on hand these days. Because I mean, finding out what moves you to bliss, connecting with the earth, standing on the grass. I could not agree with you more. Those are wonderful, wonderful points. Go ahead, Pam.
Yeah, I just want to say, because everything I like to share with people is free, easy, accessible. You know, you don't have to go on a course, you don't have to pay money, you don't have to see this guru in South America. You know, it pretty much instant, free, and simple. So anybody and everybody can do the simple, practical things that I do every day. I mean, literally, I do them. So, and they help immensely in times of change, such as we're in at the moment.
They do, and they do. Thank you for pointing that out, because they do seem oftentimes too simplistic, but they really, really do help. Grounding, meditation, going within, checking in, noticing when you're starting to feel bad because of something you saw or something you heard. Okay, maybe it's touching some belief that you didn't know that was there, but really coming back in with yourself and trying to be as in touch with love and goodness and compassion, non-judgment as you can throughout the day. Is whatever tools help you to do that. And clearly astrology is one of those tools to help with that. Well, we hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation with Pam Gregory. Little Visionaires is an independent bookstore that, beyond selling books, hosts community-focused interviews and events. And remember, the best way to support your local independent bookstore and the community we serve is as simple as buying a book. Pam Gregory discovered astrology over 42 years ago when she immigrated to Toronto, Canada after university. Her passion for the subject took her through many years of intensive study at the Faculty of Astrological Studies and then on to achieve highest honors in her master's course. Pam can be reached at thenextstep.uk.com and also pamgregory.com, where you can look for her free birth chart, download it, and also subscribe to Pam's monthly newsletter. And also look for her on YouTube, where she does wonderfully detailed astrological videos, where I have found so much information to be so practical, accessible, and helpful. Thank you, Pam.
Been a real joy and an honor to spend time with you, Bridgitte. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.